And we are live. Hello and welcome to another episode of Raising the Bar. This time I am joined with our fantastic client, our longest standing client, I have to say, Gary. Mr.
Really?
Gary Younge. Yes, really. Gary has been with Remotely Onit for almost 8 years, and it has been a fantastic journey. But before we get into that, I just want to share a little bit about who he is. He is an amazing person, firstly and foremost, aside from all of his amazing accolades, of which there are many. He's an award-winning journalist and broadcaster. He is a whole professor of sociology at Manchester University, and he is a dad and a father, a dad and a husband even. And he is also a renowned journalist, as many of you may know, as well as being an author of multiple books. So please, if I can ask you to do a virtual round of applause, although I can't hear you, for the wonderful Mr. Gary Younge. Welcome, Mr. Younge. How are you?
Thank you, Sidel. I'm very well. I'm very well. I thought you were going to talk about how we met, which was
No, we can get there. We can get there.
which
Let's
was
do
not
that.
virtually exactly, but it was. I was in America working for the
I was going to
Guardian,
say it was
and
virtual for
you.
the time.
Sorry.
I was going to say that it was virtual for the time. It wasn't virtual by today's
Yeah,
standards. It was virtual then.
and you were an administrator on the foreign desk, and we would get, and I could hear that you were black. And,
Talk to me about that. How could you hear that I was black?
I don't know, but you can. You
Yeah, you
yeah.
can.
And sometimes anyway. And we got into it, a kind of banter um, over over uh, um, over a period of time, which was very enjoyable.
Yeah, over travel bookings probably whilst you were moving from place to place in the States.
Yeah, I was doing a lot of traveling at the time, and just general shenanigans. Anyway, sorry.
Don't be sorry. That's great. I actually forgot. That's how I know we've known each other for many years, because I think that was in 2003.
It would be like 4, 5, or 6, something like that. It was up there somewhere.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I don't know that. I don't think I had a child at the time.
No,
So it would be before 2007. I think
and I
it's
think it
somewhere
was
between.
pre-marriage. Actually,
Sorry?
thinking about it, I think you weren't
Pre?
married yet either.
No, I would have been married.
Okay.
Yeah. It was like, it was in the. I arrived in America in 2003. My first child came in 2007. So I think it was about 2005, something like that.
Right. Okay. So yeah, very long time ago, and lots of travel and lots of bookings and lots of conversations over the phone, and then to move forward again to years later, which was 2016, when I did a contracting stint at the Guardian, and then we reconnected, and this time in person because you were back in London by then.
Yeah. And that's kind of, I mean, for the purposes of this conversation, I don't mean to lead it. I know you have an agenda, but that's where
Go ahead.
that's where this started, because you told me that you were leaving to start your own thing, and that you were doing some kind of freelancing administrating at the time. And I was buried under, I mean, I had my Guardian work, and then I had other work, and then other commitments that weren't work, but they were commitments. And I've never been good at email, to be honest. I'm actually, outside of your line of work, obviously, I'm always a little bit suspicious by people who are good at email, because I'm like, shouldn't you be doing other things? Like, I always say to people, but I'm not employed to answer emails. I'm employed to write and to blah, blah, blah. And I was pissing a lot of people off because I wasn't getting back to them. And I was also missing a lot of payments, because it would be like, oh, you got to invoice us.
Yeah.
I'd just be like, when do I get a chance? When am I going to get to do that? And I think, like, actually an increasing number of people. I think in the past, you didn't have to have a very big job before you might have very big job before you might have what I'm going to call a secretary for now, because that's what it would have been called at the time.
Yeah.
And increasingly, and I don't even need to speak about myself, I know a growing number of people who've got like big budgets, which I don't have, and big responsibilities in terms of staffing, who kind of share an administrator with like 4 or 5
Multiple
people. They
people.
don't have and so they spend half of their working lives when they should be doing other things, I think. Keeping their house in order. Anyway, I was buried, and I knew that I was buried, but I didn't really know what to do about it. And then I spoke to you, and you were telling me what you were doing, and that was just a chat. You weren't pitching. We were just talking about what you were up to, and I thought, oh, okay, maybe that's an idea. And then I'm not gonna lie, when I told you what I needed and and when you told me what the rates were, I was like, fucking hell, that's that's kind of I didn't know what the going rate was, but I was I thought this, honestly, this we haven't rehearsed this, so Sidel doesn't know what I'm going to say right now, but that's like, I don't know if I could afford that. And then within the first month or so, I'm not sure if you remember this, but you had already paid your way, because I'd done something for a university. I'm not going to say which university.
Yeah, let's not name them. Let's not.
and they were asking for something in order to be invoiced, and it took you quite a long time to like beat them into shape. And it wasn't. I was never ever going to do that. I don't know if I'd even have got the invoice in to start with, but the amount of nonsense, I would go as far as to say fuckeries, that was involved. I just thought, no, sorry, I would have fallen at the first hurdle, and so it didn't take long for me to really understand the value. That journey from that to like, well, this is what you get, was actually really quick.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's reassuring to know. But yeah, the bureaucracy, especially of educational institutions, to get paid is very long-winded and very arduous. We're used to it, so we know what questions to ask straight out the gate before you even commit to the booking. But it takes a while to get into that vein of knowing what type of organization it is, so what they're likely to have as their processes in place, because they don't volunteer that information. And and like I was sharing some insights with somebody on a social media post a while ago, saying that they were saying that they had to wait 60 days for an invoice to be paid. And I was saying, yeah, but it's 60 days from the time you got a purchase order number. So if you don't know that you need that number, that 60 days starts again, because that 60 days doesn't kick in until you've sent an invoice with the PO number on the invoice. So if you issue an invoice without it and then you have to reissue it, your 60 days start again. And for like really small or micro businesses, that's a disaster that can make or break somebody's living. So these are the types of things that you learn having come from the world of corporate and big businesses who have these systems in place. And when you're on the other end of those systems enforcing them, then you understand, oh, okay, this is how you can circumnavigate the system and make sure that you get paid in a timely fashion. But that was a particularly painful experience. We got there. 7 months is a record. It's the longest invoice I've ever pursued.
That was right at the beginning, I think.
It was. Yeah. Well, it was when I started pursuing it. Yeah.
And
But,
sorry, go on.
no, go ahead.
Well, just that. But honestly, quite often I wouldn't even get to submit an invoice. It's not that I'd forget. It would just be like, oh fuck, that is one more thing I've got to do. And my job is to read and write and think and talk.
Yes.
It's not to do that. So to take, an hour out of my day and then be on the end of a line waiting for someone to tell me to bloody find out what a purchase order is. Do you know what I mean? It's all so that would have been frustrating even if I had submitted the invoice, and there's no saying that I would have done prior to that. And now I can just say, Sidel, invoice, please. And bing.
It turns up, the money turns up at some point. Yeah. And we all get to move on, and we don't have to kill anybody because that. We don't have to get aggy with anybody, as I like to say. But so that's like a key thing. In one of the questions I was going to ask you was around, when did you recognize that you needed support outside of doing these things yourself? At what point was it that you recognized that, or was it just literally organically as a result of our conversation that you started to think about
it? I think there's a distinction between when I realized the problem, and that would have been years before,
right?
And when I figured out what a solution might be, which would have been when we had the conversation. So I've never been good at email. I've always been, in a way that, I know that people say, oh, I'm bad at maths. And it's like, well, you haven't really tried, or do you know what I mean? That I'm not saying that I couldn't do these things, but I wasn't doing them, and I clearly wasn't gonna do them. And I, to the extent that people do have skill sets, you can learn things, but it's not in my skill set really. I'm a generally disorganized kind of person, in a way, and so I wrote an article, it would have been like 1998 or 99, about like, I hate emails. I hate them and I don't want them.
Wow.
Yeah, like I'm drowning, and all sorts of people can get hold of you who wouldn't have bothered their ass before, because they'd have had to put a stamp on a letter and then send it, or pick up a bloody phone and then call. But they can email you and say, what do you think about X? Or how, and then you feel obliged to answer, or can you make so and so, and then it's kind of on you. And so I knew from early on, this is a nightmare. And I used to, it was a long period of pissing people off, and also of, like, I wouldn't get a mobile phone until I went to America, because I just didn't want people calling me. It was like, it was just going to be one more distraction. And, work would say, oh, you got to have one of these. And I'd think, well, I'd say to them, either I'm at home or I'm at work, and those numbers, or I don't want you calling me. That means I'm out.
Yeah.
And so this modern world, where people get hold of you through bloody words with friends, let alone WhatsApp, direct message, Twitter messaging, Instagram messaging, emails, not even a bloody half of it, Facebook message, all of these ways in which people can get hold of you and they can ask you for things, and all of the things that come with that. It only really got worse. But when it was just email and I didn't even have a mobile phone, I was already inundated.
Yeah.
So
You're a popular guy, Gary. What can you do? Like, everybody wants a piece of Gary.
that's really not it. And so I always knew that, but I hadn't actually got to a point where I thought, I also knew that the way that things were set up where I was working at the Guardian or elsewhere, that like for the amount of responsibility I had, I should have had administrative support. I think that's true for a lot of people. But it wasn't really until I spoke to you that I realized, oh, you can have some administrative support, like not, you don't have to have a full-time administrator. You can have some administrative support and it can work. And this is how it would work.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be somebody sat with you outside your desk or sat next to your desk or outside of your office for it to work, which you know, for a lot of people didn't quite compute. I mean, post-COVID, we have a very different working landscape where people recognize now that people can work remotely. But when I first started my business in 2009, and then I registered the company in 2011, those days people didn't understand how it was possible. They didn't quite get, I would say, I will do this for you, then we'll communicate in this way and then we'll share it. And I used to do my catch-up meetings one-to-one in person then. But outside of that, there's this kind of idea that if people can't see you doing something, they don't trust that you're doing it. And that was a huge hurdle to get over. So by the time we met at the Guardian in 2016, I was on a break from my business. I had fired all of my clients, for want of a better expression, and said I need to regroup. So I had paused things with the intention to start again in January 2017, which is when we started working together, and to reconfigure the way that I was working and also the client group, because prior to that I was working with independent artists, so entertainment professionals primarily. And I said that I was stepping away from working with artists and I wanted to work with small business owners and people who were coaches and consultants and authors and speakers, and people who worked in that capacity. And so you became the first client in that realm. And so by the time we had that conversation, it was, okay, I'm restarting. And then bam, here we are, nearly 8 years later. It's very, very honoured to be. And I think that the way that we work together works. I think that, you know, we do our meetings over the phone. For most people, we do our meetings on Zoom. I know that for most of the clients that we work with, people have varying levels of interest in tech. I know that you're not interested in tech to a degree. We have just started using Slack, which has been revolutionary. And I remember the first time when I said to you, so what we're going to do is Gary is going to introduce Slack, and you was like, oh no, I'm not doing that. And I was like, okay, let's see how it goes. Let's see how it goes. But the more that we move forward, the more it became a bit imperative, but also because it's collaborative in the way that we work as a team. There are 4 of us at the moment. And so it means that if somebody else needs to pick something up, they can do that without having to unpick something or figure out, you know, what were you working on? Where did you get to? If one of us is sick, we can easily cover for each other, and it works really well. But we've not had that situation, so we've been lucky so far. So you recognized the problem, and then we had the conversation, and you saw, okay, this is potentially a solution. I can see how this might work. We started working together. What types of tasks do you kind of feel like, you know, you don't have to worry about, and that I'm going to take care of for you? What kind of tasks are you able to offload out of your brain altogether and not have to think about?
Well, I'm going to answer that. I would say, first of all, that it took me a while to then figure out, and maybe you too, I don't know, to figure out how best it would work. Do you know what I mean? Like I wasn't aware. I was aware of being overwhelmed. I wasn't aware of what the solution was to being overwhelmed, because I've never had an administrator before. So, and that would be true for anybody. Do you know what I mean? That kind of, so you're aware that you've got a problem, you're aware, broadly speaking, of what the problem is, but how the solution is going to work is kind of organic, and that works.
Yeah.
And the main ones are, and it's changed actually over time.
Mm-hmm.
The main ones are invoicing, it's just taken care of.
Yeah.
Saying no,
Mm-hmm.
I can just
Yeah.
say to you no, and
Yeah.
then it's done. So I have less people pissed off at me outside of my own family, but there's nothing you can do about that. Um,
Yeah.
so saying no, invoicing, scheduling.
Mm-hmm.
So um, you alerting me that there could be a um, there could be a conflict there, like that you might be you look like you're double booked there. Um, um, Things like chasing up travel and accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
Also, kind of the other big one is the buffer. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not me saying no; it's you saying no to somebody else. He can't do
Yeah.
it, which is different to
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it, and
Mm-hmm.
or and what is it you want? What is it you are offering? So this thing you do where you say, "Can you fill out this form?" And that
Yeah.
gets rid of the trickery of um, either people who don't say if it's a paid thing or not, people who
Mm-hmm.
don't say how much time it's going to be, people don't say exactly what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Probably because they're overwhelmed as well. To be fair, or the thing where
Yeah.
people say, we, I had one of these recently. Someone was like, we can offer an honorarium.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what does that mean? Like,
Are you offering
are
it or
you
not?
offering money or you're not offering money? Make up people who I often get invites that are like, would like you to come and speak, but they don't say speak about what, they don't say for how long, they don't necessarily say where it is, they don't say whether you can get paid, blah, blah, blah. So all of that is taken care of before
Mm-hmm.
I kind of,
Need to make a
and then I can
decision.
say to you, can you set up a phone call for me to
Yeah.
find out more?
Mm-hmm.
So what it doesn't do, and it couldn't do, and I wouldn't want it to do, actually, is I'll have you make the decision for me. Do you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to say, no, he's not doing that. That just sounds boring. He is doing that. He don't want that book. He does, but just but that once, so I still have to do that
Mm-hmm.
sort of brainwork myself. But then I say to you, yes, but not on Tuesday, and then everything else is kind of covered because I can't reply and say yes, but not on Tuesday. So
Yeah.
formulating a response is, and then the other one would be, people. There are people who are very persistent, who sometimes, in love as in work, you just end up saying yes because like they want it more. Do you know what I mean? Just like
Yeah.
okay, fine, but you don't want to do it,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't. I'm less likely to be in that situation now because of you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, so, and ultimately, what it brings me is at least two things. One is a peace of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Every now and then, I do look at my inbox and get a bit freaked out, but that's because I haven't
Yeah.
been in my inbox recently to do the filter. Not, do you know what I mean? And then I know,
Mm-hmm.
well, this is 45 minutes of filtering, and then
Yeah.
as opposed to looking at it and just thinking, no,
Not today.
no, yeah, not ever. It's just never gonna happen for me here.
Mm.
And therefore missing out on opportunities. Some of the shit that comes my way, I'd like to do, but I can't get to it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, so there's that, and then just the extent to which one presents as a coherent, organized entity, or as a bit of a shambles man in a weird anorak. Do you know what I mean? That like when I'm not getting back to people and then getting back to people, not invoicing them, and they're chasing for the invoice, it doesn't look that good. Generally speaking, I'm not bothered about how things look as opposed to how things are. But it's not irrelevant how things look. So, yeah.
That does something for you as well. So would you say it's fair to say that having support helps you to maintain healthy boundaries?
Yeah, helps. I mean, I think that the modern world is much less boundaried than it should be. So it helps to maintain healthy boundaries as much as that is possible. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but given how boundaryless the world can be, someone could text you at 2:00 in the morning asking you if you're free the next day to do blah blah blah. You know, that you are increasingly, constantly available in a range of ways. That given that those are the stakes, then this absolutely having you absolutely minimizes the trepidation.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, I hear that. And in regards to like just how entitled people feel, because I feel like with your world in particular, more than other clients in particular, people often come across as very entitled to your time. And I find it fascinating, for want of a better word. I just really do find it fascinating.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting thing, and without wanting to get too like poor me about it, because it comes with other benefits, and it's a product of a certain kind of success, I guess. But the notion that you might have a life, that you might have children, that you that you weren't sitting and waiting for that email before you did anything that day, that you might have had other things on, that you might have other priorities, that you know, I write books. You can't just write a book like an hour here, an hour there, or not the kind of books that I write. You have to sit and you have to think and you need space and say to people, I'm trying to write a book at the moment, so I can't. They're like, well, what about Tuesday then? And it's like, well, I'll still be writing a book on Tuesday. Do you know what I mean? And there is just a sense of, but that's not fair. I just asked you, and as you say, entitlement to my time and indifference, which I think comes with, to the extent that I'm a public figure, it comes with being a public figure that there is a sense of public ownership of public figures, and it's like, well, it's like the thing when if I do an event and I'm signing books, then at the end of that event, so I'd have done an event, I'd have talked for like half an hour, 45 minutes. Then I'd have answered questions for another half an hour. Then I'll go and sign books, and someone will say, there was a question I wanted to ask you. And there's a big line of people waiting to sign. And I know, because I've tried this before, I've said, sorry, I've been speaking for over an hour. I'm tired. And the sense is like, fuck you, I paid £8 for the ticket, I won't get my question in. And I've actually come to terms with the fact that in those public spaces, if you're a public figure, you have limited rights, because you've asked people to pay money to hear you are, for that moment, you are somewhat publicly owned. Limited rights. You still have rights, but they're limited.
Mm.
And if you then take that into the email sphere and the communication sphere, it's
Yeah.
a similar thing.
Mm.
So I got into fights with people where they've said, this is before we were working together. Yeah, I emailed you and you didn't get back to me. And well, whenever they say you emailed me, I say, did I get back to you? I'm sorry if I didn't. I get very busy. And they say, no, you didn't. I say, sorry about that. I do get overwhelmed. And one woman was like, this was in Bristol. She was like, yeah, I was really disappointed. And I said, you were disappointed that I didn't get back to you. And I said, I'm not a public utility. I'm not a gas board. And she said, yeah, you say you're like man of the people and you're working for people. I said, first of all, I've never said that. But secondly, you don't pay me and I have a job. The reason you want to contact me is because of the articles I write, not because of the emails I write. So, and at that point, she was trying to step away. And I was like, no, I ain't finished with you yet. Like, just because you email someone out of the blue with your own doesn't necessarily mean that they can get to you. That is kind of not a fair expectation. And and I am genuinely sorry that I didn't get back to you, but that's because I'm just one person. And in any one day, I might get 40 emails. So would you rather that I wrote the articles that brought you here, or would you rather that I spent all day writing those emails? Yeah, I don't think she's come to another event that I've done since then.
Guess she was disappointed with your response.
Yeah, I think I pissed her off. So that's okay, because then now there's two of us pissed off. Equinox.
Equal, yeah, I was going to say equal. So in regard to the support in the world of responding to people, helping you to maintain boundaries, how does the support and does the support also impact your day-to-day life, your personal life outside of the world of work that you do?
Well, it gives you, well, first of all, you're not anxious the whole time. You're not constantly thinking, oh, fuck, I should be doing something. I've got all of these other things to do. That when you step away when I step away from my work, whenever that is, I can do that in the knowledge that things are being taken care of, that I'm not missing out on money, that I'm not pissing anybody off. Particularly also if you're doing like a lot of transatlantic work. So requests can come in at any time.
Yeah.
That and sometimes they're urgent, sometimes they're not. That you can find a lot of it sort of bleeding into the rest of the day. You've got to get your work done. Then you've got your communications to do and your invoicing and so on. And that, that's more hours in a day, which means less hours in a day for the things that, also matter to you, like family and cooking. And that's the other thing, is that people kind of, they somehow don't understand you as having other obligations like kids or family, or so they'll say, well, what about X? And you're like, well, that's half term.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, yeah, but you're not at school. It's not half term for you. So yeah, so it releases both psychic energy from the anxiety of like feeling constantly behind. I think it's a function of late stage capitalism, that we all feel behind. I think that's almost inevitable, but that I don't feel that in a way that I did before. I just feel like as behind as everybody else. Everybody's behind because it's not, these things aren't just happening to me. But I also feel like the things that I need to be taken care of get taken care of. And every now and then there's an emergency, and one really good and important example was just like 2 months ago when I was I went to Manchester to do a series of events, and then from Manchester I was going to Derry in Northern Ireland to do an event, and then I was coming back. And on the train to Manchester, I realised that I didn't have my passport, and I was flying to Derry 2 days later. I also realised that of the 4 events I was doing in Manchester over those 2 days, one of them involved someone who was coming from London. And I thought if I can get his address, then I could get the passport to him and bring it up. But I couldn't have done that without you. And I know that because I had to try everything. I had to think of every possible way. So I was also calling my wife. It involved my daughter at a certain stage, who's 11, like finding my passport. And I'll tell you more about my relationship than you need to know. But my wife didn't get back to me. She was busy.
Oh, did she not? I didn't realize that.
Not until like very late in the day. It would have been too late. And I would have been, but I got hold of you. You were able to organize a courier, which I didn't know how much that would have cost, but you were able to say, well, it's going to cost 20 quid. You were able to organize a courier, send it to the place where my daughter was. My daughter came and got the passport from the house. She was being looked after by a neighbor, got the courier to the neighbor's house, got the passport to the guy who brought the passport to me, and then I was able to go to Derry because I hate letting people down. And so I would have found a way to get to Derry, and it wouldn't have been pretty. It would have probably involved coming back to London, getting my passport, getting a train to so-and-so, or flat. I mean, it would have been a hot mess. And that was, I was telling people this story, quite a boring story actually, but I didn't care because it happened to me, so they had to hear it. You were the star. You were the star of the show.
I'll take it. Thanks. On it by name, on it by nature. What can I tell you? It was quite straightforward. I do remember you being quite a bit stressed about, are we going to be able to get it in time before you have to fly? And it was like, it'll be fine. It's a courier. We'll get it. It'll be sorted. So straightforward. But it's only straightforward if you know how. So I get it.
Well, it's only straightforward if you know how, and it's only straightforward because there was someone with the experience to make it straightforward. I wouldn't have known where to start with getting a career.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And that's true for most people, because outside of an employee situation where you have a post room and somewhere where you can go and say to somebody, I need to get this from point A to point B, most people wouldn't really know how to do a courier independently.
And I would have assumed it would have cost a lot more than it did. There was a thing where I was saying to you, could they do it after 11? And you were like, let me just check. No, they can't. It has to be by this. Like there was too much I didn't know, and this is really important in terms of like your value to me. I was doing 2 talks that day.
Yeah.
And 2 talks the next day. And that's my job.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that they were, particularly one of them, which was kind of me, test driving the first chapter of my new book. It was really kind of quite important that I got it right. So I didn't want to be thinking about passports and whatnot. And as it happened, I didn't need to. But that's, in a sense, that's the point in a way, right? That kind of like I say it to you, and then you take care of it, and then I can worry about the things that I'm actually
Yeah.
employed to do. One might argue that I'm employed to get from A to B. You know, I don't beat myself up about the fact that I wasn't going abroad, so I forgot my passport. I forgot that you
Yeah.
needed a passport for an internal flight. It's not crazy. It's,
Mm.
you know, I do some stupid things sometimes, like get on the wrong train or something like that. But this, I wouldn't bother you with that. But this was, I think I could bother you with that, but I wouldn't. But
Yeah.
this was a regular mistake from someone who's a bit over busy. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
But having you allows me to be over busy
Yeah.
and get all the things
Yeah.
done that I'm interested in doing.
I understand that, and it's a good thing that you also knew that you could just say, Sid, like this is happening, and that you didn't have to figure it out before you told me and tell me what you needed me to do, but just tell me what
Mm,
the problem was and there would be a solution. Which I think is a key thing. I think often when people are considering having a PA or a virtual assistant, if that's the term that they prefer to use, then they often feel like they have to delegate. They often feel like they need to say everything that needs to happen and how it needs to happen. And my thing is always, you don't. You just need to share the outcome that you're looking for, and then we figure
mm.
out the rest. And whether that's the journey, whether it's a system, whether it's a process, whether it's just doing the task, you don't have to do the thinking. That's not what we're here for. So it's a
Yeah.
good look
And
that
I
you
guess that's what
knew
I
that.
meant at the beginning when I was saying at the beginning you have to work out what that is for you. Do you know what I mean? What
Mm-hmm.
um and I think probably you have to work out what that is for. I remember a few times right at the beginning you saying, I think I could help you more if
Yeah.
you could point me in some directions where these like and quite often the truth was well I don't you were pointing out blockages that I either hadn't recognized or hadn't identified or
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what to do with. And there probably still, there are probably still ways that will
Yeah.
emerge. Like
Mm-hmm.
since I stopped being a journalist, weirdly, or maybe since I stopped working at the Guardian, so I worked there for 26 years, I get lots of requests to blur books or to have books sent, and that could easily take up an hour a day.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an exaggeration, but it would certainly be a couple hours a week
Mm-hmm.
just going through those. But I can say to you, I'd like to read this. I'm not going to be able to blurb it in time. What is the deadline for that blurb?
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not going to have time to read that book. Yes, please, can you send that to Manchester and so on? And I can just get that done. And I know I've said it a few times, but the issue of like you're not pissing people off by not getting
Yeah.
back to them,
Mm-hmm.
which some of that they have to own, to be honest.
Yeah.
You send
Mm-hmm.
an unsolicited email to someone, maybe they're not going to get back to you, but
Mm-hmm.
you don't know where the next one of those is coming from. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or how angry or persistent people might be.
Yeah. Persistence. People are very persistent.
Yeah,
Um,
or rude is another term for that sometimes.
well,
Or
yeah.
inconsiderate. People can be
Yeah.
very
Exactly.
inconsiderate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in regards to people sending requests, and I know you said earlier, like that I can be a buffer. Like if you don't want to do something for whatever reason, then you can just know that we can say no, and you don't have to feel any way about that. Does that feel really guilt free now than it would have been
Well,
to type the message
you know,
yourself?
truth is, and this is probably more about me than you want to know, I don't really do guilt a lot. Like, it's just
Mm-hmm.
even pissing people off. I hated pissing people off, but I didn't feel guilty because I felt like when you send an unsolicited email, like you have to, like I'm just one human being and I'm working as much as I can. So simmer. But I would say that it removes a layer of awkwardness and of burden, really,
Mm.
of kind of and that this is particularly in terms of saying no
Mm-hmm.
and asking about money,
Mm-hmm.
that it's that if it's coming from you, it's coming from a different place, and it's coming from it. What it does is with you there, it establishes that we are not friends. We might become
Yeah.
friends. We are not
Mm-hmm.
friends. Um, this is a professional request, and this is a
Mm-hmm.
professional response.
Yeah.
And so you're asking me to do work. You don't feel in any way bad about that. So I'm going to ask you about money. I don't
Mm-hmm.
need to feel bad about that. But if it comes from you, then
Mm-hmm.
it it roots the whole thing in a professional context, which is why when it's friends, if it's people that I know, I often say to you, let me do that because I know them
Yeah.
and I
Mm-hmm.
uh but it has to be someone who I wouldn't want to slight. I often say to
Yeah.
people, if you write to me at this address, you will get a response.
Mm-hmm.
It might not be from me
Yeah.
directly, but you
Yeah.
must know that I will have seen the response, and it's not a slight. It's just so that to make sure that you get a response. Which
Right.
I always do tell people. But those awkward, the things that were awkward, they're like, oh, when people now say, oh, I emailed you
Mm.
before, because we've been going for 7 years. Either they've got a long memory and a big grudge, or I know they've got a response.
Yeah. Yeah. And often now, people email you and they'll address it to me. Like
Yeah,
they do that straight at the gate, or they address it to both of us, which is,
yeah.
quite nice that they recognize there's a structure and there is a
Mm,
way that we do things, and they respect that. So that's nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the details are important. They're like, okay, so where's the train ticket? Where do you want him? And then it all appears in my diary, which,
Yeah.
it took me a while to get used to. Of like, I'll get somewhere quite often and be like, I'll get out of the train station. I'll be like, where's this place again? And ordinarily, I'd have to go through my emails
Mm.
to find it. But now it's in my diary. So I'm going to my diary and there's the address. And then I can, and often with the location thing on it. So then I can just press that and then I know where I'm going.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's a bit
yeah.
handy. So what would you say if somebody said to you, oh, I'm a bit, not necessarily overwhelmed, because I don't think that people need to wait until they're overwhelmed to potentially benefit from support. But if somebody's doing their own stuff and they're doing everything, or like hashtag all of the things, as I like to say, and they said to you, oh, it's a lot. I'm doing this like I've ventured out from employment, or I'm doing my own thing, and this is a lot. How would you recommend that somebody engage support? Like, what would be the kind of selling point that you would share with them?
I think I'd say, if you can afford it, not that
Yeah,
it's exorbitant, but like there is that.
it's a cost. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that you can buy yourself both peace of mind and it will release you to do other things. Like, what do you? I think I would, first of all, I would ask them. I'd want to know how bad it is. Like, how much are
Mm.
they? How much time are they spending on what is essentially administration work?
Mm-hmm.
How I can imagine that the conversation would come after something's gone wrong. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? Like, that they didn't get paid for something, or struggling with the university, um,
The
um,
finance procedures.
yeah, or had a travel problem, and it's like, yeah, I would have had that problem, but I don't now because of X, and that's not the wholesale answer probably that you were after, but the reason is that kind of you do tailor your services to the needs of the person, so
Yes.
it really would depend on them. Do you know what I mean? Some people are just always traveling,
Yeah.
and you could help them with that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas some people are always at their desk,
Yeah.
and their work is email driven or communication driven, and you could help them with that. But that would be a different kind of help, but essentially
Yeah.
it would be the same help. And
Mm-hmm.
the question I would always ask them is, how much of your time are you spending doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing? And how much time are you spending on paperwork?
Yeah.
Because you can spend, particularly because it's not your job, so I'd be slower at it than you would be.
Mm-hmm.
You can spend your whole time doing paperwork. Do you know what I mean? You could spend an inordinate amount of time doing paperwork, and things like, I don't know, you have that magic invoice machine that you use that puts things in and
Yeah.
brings out an invoice, and that's a system.
Yeah.
I don't know that I couldn't use that system, but I do know that I did know about it, and that learning it and how to use it, even if it only takes 10 minutes, is sort of 10 minutes I'm probably not going to spend.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because I'm doing something else. And it's a bit like cleaning the leaves out of your gutter or something. You know it's got to be done, but you just
get around to it at some point.
Yeah, and usually that some point with the leaves in your gutter is when things start falling apart.
Yeah, I hear that. Is there anything that you have ever considered that you think, actually, I should ask Sid that to do that? I wonder if Sid would do that you've never asked?
There are not that many. I mean, and that would be where, because I've known you for a long time, and we were friends before this, and so I feel like you know me well enough that if I asked you something, you'd tell me if I was taking the piss. Do you know what I mean? But I can't even imagine what that would be. But say
to pick up your dry cleaning, that's what it would be.
Well, okay.
That's the only thing that I've always, since the life of an EA, from day one,
really?
It's like, don't ask me to get your dry cleaning. Yeah, because when I started very many years ago, that's the kind of thing that personal assistants and secretaries got asked to do, is to go and pick up shirts from the dry cleaners or put cleaning in dry cleaners. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So but we're virtual now. It's a bit different.
That feels like a very specific grievance, and fortunately, I wear all of my clothes to death, and I wear them whether they're dry cleaned or not. So it wouldn't be a problem. It'd be more like, take me to the cleaners. But I think that so here's one. Every year for Christmas, I order an African football shirt for my nephew. He likes football. Right. He's about 11. I basically picked the nicest color shirts that there are. This year I got him a Cape Verde, like they've got football. It's a lovely blue shirt with those violins on it. One year there was this offer. I never usually do this. I don't know why I did it, but there was this offer. You can get, I don't know, X bottles of wine. And I thought, oh, okay. I didn't realize that then, it's rookie error. That then, if you didn't cancel it within X number of days, then you were going to get 25 quid's worth of what. Anyway, they still fucking email me.
Oh no.
And I'm sure there is a way. They owe me 20 quid. And I'm sure there's a way of just getting the 20 quid back. But every time I see it, I think, oh man, I need to get rid of that.
Rolled around again.
And they've got my 20 quid. So I'm not just going to unsubscribe. So then I just get these emails and they, and I think I should ask Sid about that. But I don't think I couldn't ask you. It's just that whenever we're talking, it kind of doesn't come up. And it's a little bit like, it's not dry cleaning.
Yeah.
But I feel like it is, it's a personal problem that I'm asking. It's just got nothing to do with my work life. And I guess, apart from that, it's in my email box. It's in the email box.
We'll find it. We'll get to the bottom of it, and we'll get you 20 quid back.
But so it's not that I feel that I couldn't ask you, but I don't. And I kind of keep meaning to, but there must be a reason why I don't, because generally, I do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, before we wrap up, we don't have any questions, so I do want to ask one question that I'd like to wrap up with, which is, obviously, Remotely Onit is based on possibilities. That's what we frame the brand on. And so I'd love to know from you, if you could complete the sentence that says, Remotely Onit makes it possible for me.
Remotely Onit makes it possible for me to do my job, and to it makes it possible for me to do my job, to get paid, and to have as uncluttered a workspace as I could have. And that means it makes it possible for me to kind of to open my laptop and go to my emails and other things without some sense of dread. I don't think I'm alone in that sense of like, oh fuck, I've got to log on now. I wonder what mess awaits me.
Fantastic. That's good to know. So thank you for sharing. I know. Anything you want to ask me before we wrap up? You don't have to. Just while we're here.
Well, I mean, I wasn't fully aware that it had only just. I certainly didn't know that I was your oldest client.
Longest standing, not oldest, Gary. But yeah, longest standing.
Probably both. I'm interested to know how you think it's going for you.
I think it's going well. It's going well for me. I enjoy our relationship first and foremost, which is really important. We don't work with people that we don't like, so there's always that. And that's real. Like, if I have a call with somebody straight out the gate and my spirit attack them, as Caribbeans would say, then I don't work with them and I refer them on to other people, because we spend a lot of hours doing what we do with people and we're very involved in people's lives. There has to be a level of, likability and connection, and alignment is really important to me. So I think that we are very well aligned, and I enjoy that I get to help you to focus on the things that you're passionate about, and to actually be able to just, not have to deal with the things that you don't want to deal with. It lights me up, and I can imagine my friend cringing at this because I use the phrase often, but it really does light me up to see how I can impact somebody else's life for them to focus on their expertise. And I think that you're a perfect example of that. You get to be a great writer and to to focus on important matters in the world and show up as your best self without worrying about whether you're going to get paid to do that. And that feels good. So I think it's going well, and long may it continue.
Splendid.
Cool. I thought you were going to say something else. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate that you took the time out. And for anybody watching on the replay, feel free to share your questions in the comments and I'll come back to you. But in the meantime, thanks for tuning in. Gary, thank you for your time and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. See you next week. Take care.
You're coming back, are you?
But coming back on the show.